Kate Koval is gone. And LSU didn't just lose 8 points and 6 rebounds a night. They lost their only 6'5" post defender with proven SEC experience. Now Kim Mulkey may have to decide whether a 17-year-old freshman from Russia, a 6'2" athletic forward, or a 6'3" floor spacer becomes the answer at center. And here's the debate. Did LSU's front court just get worse, or did Koval's departure accidentally force Mulkey into a more dangerous version of this team? Because those are two very different possibilities.
Prime Field!
Before we start screaming that LSU suddenly has a massive hole at center, we need to establish exactly what Kate Koval was. Last season, Koval played all 35 games, starting 17, while averaging 8.3 points, 6.3 rebounds, 1.2 blocks, and 1.1 steals in only 16.6 minutes per game. She shot 56% from the floor and finished with 43 blocks. But the stat that jumps off the page? 93 of her 219 rebounds were offensive. That's roughly 2.7 offensive boards per game, despite playing fewer than 17 minutes. That wasn't empty production. Against Arkansas, Koval gave LSU 12 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 blocks. 5 blocks. That was LSU's first 5-block performance by a player since Angel Reese in 2024. So when LSU announced on August 24th that Koval was leaving for personal reasons, this wasn't simply a bench piece disappearing. Mulkey lost a proven SEC rebounder, shot blocker, and physical 6'5" body. But, and this is where the conversation gets interesting, LSU did not lose its only center option, because 10 days before Koval's departure, Mulkey had already signed another 6'5" post, Anna Minaeva, and that changes this entire conversation. Minaeva may be the single biggest swing piece on LSU's roster now. LSU lists her at 6'5", and she arrives after playing professionally with NBA Moscow. Across multiple Russian competitions, she averaged 11.2 points and 9.6 rebounds, and LSU specifically highlighted her rim protection, passing, defensive mobility, and ability to run the floor. Sounds perfect, right? Not so fast, because those numbers require context. Against Russia's top Premier League competition specifically, reporting had her closer to roughly 5.6 points and 4.1 rebounds per game. That doesn't make her a bad prospect. It makes her a mystery. There's a gigantic difference between having professional experience and being ready to battle SEC centers every night at 17 years old. That's the gamble. Koval wasn't some superstar playing 35 minutes, but LSU knew what it was getting from her. Box out, contest. Crash the offensive glass. Protect the rim. Repeat. With Minaeva, LSU has size. What LSU doesn't have yet is certainty. And there's another layer here that we need to handle carefully. Koval is Ukrainian, Minaeva is Russian. Mulkey confirmed that she discussed recruiting Minaeva with Koval before beginning the process because she understood how personal the war was for Koval and her family. But LSU has not said Minaeva caused Koval's departure. Mulkey and LSU have consistently described Koval's decision as personal and asked that her privacy be respected. So the basketball question isn't, did Minaeva force Koval out? We don't know that. The basketball question is much more interesting. Was Mulkey already preparing for a different front court before Koval ever left? Because here's option number 2, Grace Knox. And if Mulkey decides she doesn't want to put everything on Minaeva immediately, Knox gives LSU an entirely different identity. As a freshman, Knox averaged 8.8 points and 4.6 rebounds in 18.5 minutes, while shooting a ridiculous 62.1% from the field. She's only 6'2", so let's be clear, putting Knox at the 5 isn't replacing Koval with another Koval. It's basically saying, we're done trying to beat you with traditional size. Catch us if you can. Imagine LSU playing faster, switching more actions, pressuring the perimeter, and forcing opposing centers to defend in space. Against slower front courts, Knox could become a matchup weapon. Instead of asking, how do we replace Koval's 43 blocks? Mulkey could ask, how do we make your center irrelevant? That's a fundamentally different philosophy. But here's the pushback. What happens against South Carolina? What happens against Texas? What happens when LSU faces elite size, doesn't force turnovers, and the opponent starts living on the offensive glass? That's where the small ball experiment gets tested. Because Knox gives you speed, she gives you efficiency. She gives you athleticism. She does not magically become 6'5", and LSU cannot scheme height into existence. And then we get to maybe the most fascinating option, Noa Morro. Morro averaged 8.0 points, 7.4 rebounds, and 1.6 assists in Spain, while knocking down 27 of 74 threes, 36.5%. At 6'3", she's not necessarily your traditional paint-bound center either. But that's the point. Morro could allow LSU to completely change the geometry of the floor. If Morro can reliably space to three, suddenly an opposing rim protector has a decision. Stay home, Morro gets an open three. Close out, now LSU's guards have a cleaner lane. Switch, attack the mismatch. And LSU has the perimeter personnel to make that dangerous. Remember, losing Koval doesn't mean LSU suddenly loses all defensive playmaking. Malaysia Fulwiley had 50 blocks and 99 steals last season. 50 blocks from the perimeter. Koval was actually second on LSU in blocks. That gives Mulkey a fascinating alternative. Maybe LSU doesn't replace every Koval block with another center block. Maybe they create more turnovers before opponents even reach the rim. Pressure the ball, front the post, send earlier weak side help. Trap selectively, then run. That's how you turn a personnel loss into a tactical shift. Now before LSU fans start saying, see, we're better without her. No, that's way too easy. Because there's one thing Minaeva, Knox, and Morro cannot currently claim. They have not proven they can do Koval's job against SEC competition. Minaeva has never played NCAA basketball. Morro is transitioning from European basketball. Knox has SEC experience, but she would be taking on a very different defensive responsibility playing extended minutes at center. Koval already survived that environment. She had already defended SEC actions. She had already dealt with SEC physicality. She had already been tested on the glass. Last season, LSU got from Koval 292 points, 219 rebounds, 93 offensive rebounds, 43 blocks, 37 steals, 581 minutes. You don't simply erase that and assume three players collectively absorb it with zero friction. There will probably be nights when LSU misses her. Especially when the Tigers can't generate transition offense and have to survive a physical half-court game. That's the danger. LSU's ceiling might actually become more versatile, but its floor could become less stable. And championship teams eventually get forced into ugly games. Minaeva's size, Knox, speed, Morro, spacing. Here's why I don't think Mulkey chooses one permanent replacement. I think LSU's answer will be matchup basketball. Against elite traditional centers, Minaeva gets the first shot. Against slower opponents, use Knox, increase tempo, and attack them before the defense gets set. Against teams packing the paint, put Morro at the 5, stretch the defense, and create driving lanes. The research points to exactly those three distinct roster tools. Minaeva for conventional interior defense, Knox for athletic finishing and pace, and Morro for shooting and front court versatility. And that's why saying LSU has no center misses the story. LSU absolutely has center options. What LSU no longer has is a proven SEC-tested 6'5" center. That said, that's a huge distinction. And maybe Mulkey's job isn't to find another Koval. Maybe that's the trap. Maybe the goal is to make LSU harder to prepare for because you don't know what kind of center you're getting that night. So here's my prediction. Early in the season, LSU's front court defense will probably look less consistent. You're replacing experience with experimentation. There will be missed rotations. There will be rebounding breakdowns. There may be games where Minaeva looks 17. There may be possessions where Knox gets buried by a bigger center. There may be nights where Morro's spacing doesn't compensate for what LSU gives up defensively. But by SEC play, I think Mulkey has the personnel to turn this into something far more flexible than people expect, because instead of one answer at center, she potentially has three. And if Minaeva develops quickly enough to handle traditional matchups while Knox and Morro become change-of-pace options, then Koval's departure doesn't necessarily destroy LSU's front court. It transforms it. And that brings us to the biggest question of this entire story. LSU finished last season 29-6, falling 87-85 to Duke in the Sweet 16. For a program trying to get back into national championship territory, the margins are tiny. 1 rebound, 1 rim contest, 1 mismatch, 1 freshman being ready 3 months earlier than expected. Those things can decide seasons. So drop your answer below. Did LSU actually get weaker at center when Kate Koval left? Or did her departure accelerate a front-court transformation Kim Mulkey was already building? And if you're Mulkey, who gets the biggest minutes at the 5? Anna Minaeva, Grace Knox, or Noa Morro? Subscribe to Prime Field if you want more women's college basketball breakdowns, where we go past the headline and actually talk basketball. Because when SEC play starts, we're going to find out very quickly whether LSU lost its center, or discovered 3 different ones.
Prime Field.